Okay, so I said I was going to talk more about what about perception and what's out there versus what's in here. And Rupert Sheldrake, who is a biologist, refers to it as the extended mind. And he asks a question, a very provocative question, about the perception of color. Now we know that is there. Color is a certain wavelength of light, and the way we perceive it in our minds has to do with what wavelength of light is being reflected by an object. But why don't we see color? I mean, color doesn't exist out there. It exists in our brains as an interpretation by our brain of what a certain wavelength means or looks like. So, if that's so, why do we see color? Why do we perceive color wrapped around an object like a skin instead of here in our brains? Why don't we see it in our heads? Or perhaps the provocative answer would be that we are seeing it in our heads, that when we project a color or the interpretation red outward onto an object, that, for instance, this object, it's red, but that's just the light on it. Why do why do we see this as the color red wrapped around the object rather than inside our heads where it is created? Why do we take what's in our heads and project it outward into the world and wrap it around an object? And like I said, the provocative answer is that the object really is in here and not out there. Out there is just an illusion, a projection. And also, you know, if the other question is that if we have a blind spot on every eye, right? If you take an object, and this is a salt mill, and if you take an object and you hold it at arm's length and you close one eye and you focus straight ahead with the other open eye and you move the object, arc it to the right, slowly, there will come a point where the top of the object will be in your blind spot. That's a spot in your field of vision where all the nerves send data to your brain, and there are no cones on that area to receive light. But you would think that logically that once that object gets into your blind spot, that you would see a void, an empty space, just a space with nothing in it, because you're blind in that area. You shouldn't be able to see anything. But instead, something magical happens. The background fills in the edges of that space in the shape of the object, knits it in, and produces a whole picture. But logically that can't be there. It's not exactly there because you can't see in that area. So what are you doing? Your brain is filling in the blanks of what it believes ought to be there rather than what is actually there. So we are never ever sure what is a faithful representation of the world out there and what is being created by our brains. There are stories of people not seeing what's there, what's out there. For instance, there is a story in a book I was reading. It's called Alternate Realities by Lawrence Lashan, and he talks about I think it was Darwin who sailed a ship. I forget where he sailed the ship to, and Darwin, this large sailing ship is anchored about 2 miles out to shore, and the natives gather around to watch as these small rowboats bring the crew into the shore. And the natives are able to see the small rowboats, but for some reason they were not able to see the large ship sitting against the horizon 2 miles out, even though the crew all stood there, their boats standing side by side. The crew could see the large sailing ship, but the natives could not. And what if the crew could see it because the ship was part of their reality? It was how they had arrived at this island. And in their reality, large sailing ships exist. It's not bizarre, it's not strange. But in the natives' reality, in their limited reality, only small rowboats are possible, and so they only saw what is possible. Their brains, even though the light is coming off, presumably the ship is out there, presumably, and the light is reflecting off the ship and hitting their retina, but their brain filters that data out so they don't perceive that they see the ship sitting there on the horizon. Another example is something closer to home. It's something that happened on a Christian's page. I'm subscribed to someone called Christopher L. And King Heathen gave him an award one time, and that's how I came to be subscribed to Christopher L, because I was curious. So I go on to Christopher L's pages when he makes videos, and I comment sometimes. And this time when I went on, I saw a comment by an obvious atheist, and I responded to the atheist, and I said to the atheist, "That makes perfect sense to me." And I went on my merry way doing my other thing, checking my email and whatnot. And then I got a response from the atheist, and the atheist said, what about it don't you understand? And the tone was a bit hard from him. So I was scratching my head. I'm thinking, why would he be upset? I thought I was agreeing with him. So I went back to the page to check what I had written to see if I had made a typo. And I read it very slowly and carefully, and I had not made a typo. I said, "This makes perfect sense to me." So while I was doing that, I got another email that said, "Oh, I misread," or I can't recall what he said exactly, but he said something along the lines that he misread what I said, and so on and so on. I understand what you mean now. And I realized that in that split second, that atheist, being on a Christian's webpage, read my comment, he was operating according to his belief that an atheist will not get a fair shake on a Christian's video in the comment section. And his belief caused his brain to filter out the reality of what I had written, which was agreeing with him. And he instead saw a different sentence where some of the words were omitted, and he inserted words into the sentence that showed that that corresponded with his belief that someone would disagree with him. But it only happened for a split second, because when he went back and he read it slowly, he was able to see what was actually there. Either that happened, or he clicked on my name and went to my page and saw that I was a non-believer, and he came back to read the sentence with a new belief, a new understanding of who I was, and read it according to that new belief operating. So that's what I mean about not being so sure about what's out there in the world and what's really in here, and whether they are the same thing, and whether that out there is really a projection, a holographic projection by us, that we in turn respond to and react to and get feedback. And there's a constant loop of feedback, of data. And so when you look at the universe and you think, well, that's that, are you really sure? Are you sure it's that? food for thought.